In the heart of West Africa, where the dry season turns the soil to blood-red powder, and the wind carries both hope and heat, a young man sits behind a plain wooden desk, 35 years old, dressed in a modest military uniform, eyes tracing. The future of a nation in crisis. This is not a war room, not yet, but the silence here is heavier than gunfire. Outside, in the buzzing streets of Ouagadougou, vendors shout, motorbikes weave through dust, and children chase worn soccer balls. They have no idea their country is about to stand at the edge of a precipice, and Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the world's youngest sitting president, must decide whether to leap or fight gravity. Burkina Faso is under siege, not just from armed jihadist factions pressing in from the east, but from the ghosts of colonizers past and the vultures of global politics circling above. The country has recently broken military ties with France, drawn closer to Moscow, and walked a tightrope between East and West, all while its people cry out for safety, dignity, and food on the table. Every move Captain Traoré makes is watched by forces larger than his borders. Every hesitation could cost lives. That's when the phone rings. It cuts through the room like a bullet. Salifu, the foreign affairs advisor, bursts in, his breath short, his voice stunned. "Mr. President," he says, eyes wide, "it's the White House. President Trump wants to speak with you. Personally." For a moment, Traoré doesn't speak. Trump, recently returned to office, had barely mentioned Africa since his re-election. Why now? Why here? Why him? Traoré sets down his pen and adjusts the red beret on his desk, his symbol of discipline, of revolution, of Sankara. He's not a politician in the Western sense. He rose through the military. He believes in sovereignty, not theater. But even he knows this moment is not ordinary. He tells Salifu to prepare the secure room. Then, with a deep breath, he stands, straightens his uniform, and steps into history. 25 minutes later, the fortified conference room is cold, the air conditioning humming like a warning. A screen flickers to life. There he is, Donald Trump, grinning wide, flanked by advisors in dark suits and steely eyes. "Captain Traoré," Trump says, "I've heard a lot about you, a bold young leader. I like that." Traoré nods once. Calm, collected, unreadable. "Mr. President," he replies, "this is unexpected. How can I assist you?" Trump leans in. His grin fades into business. Let's cut to the chase. He talks terrorism, security, stability. Then he shifts. "Your country is sitting on a gold mine," he says, literally. Gold, zinc, lithium, the future. He lays out the pitch, billions in U.S. investment, roads, hospitals, elite military training, unmatched surveillance technology, and in return, access, influence, a permanent U.S. base. No one's offering you a better deal. As Trump speaks, Traoré stares past the screen. Outside the palace window, new towers funded by Emirati money rise in the distance, half-finished skeletons of a promised tomorrow. Beyond them stands a solemn monument to the nation's martyrs. His mind races. He doesn't respond immediately. He doesn't need to. The weight of 100 years of stolen resources, broken promises, and unfulfilled dreams presses on his shoulders. "I appreciate your offer," he says at last, voice calm, "but I'll need to consult my ministers. We'll reconvene tomorrow." Trump offers a tight smile, almost a warning. "Don't take too long. Deals like this don't last forever." The screen goes black, and in that moment, Captain Ibrahim Traoré knows one thing for sure. This is not just a deal. This is a test, not of power, but of principle. And the world is about to watch what choice he makes next. The night fell like a curtain over Ouagadougou, but inside the presidential compound, the lights never dimmed. Traoré's war room, now humming with quiet urgency, had transformed into a high-stakes battlefield. No bullets, no bombs, just papers, projections, and principles. The president had called in his closest circle, the Minister of Mines, the Minister of Defense, his top economists, and General Tap Sober, a war-hardened commander with eyes like carved stone. A digital dossier sat at the center of the long table. Sleek, glossy, laced with American promises. On the surface, the proposal was dazzling. A $25 billion infrastructure plan. Roads that would link the north to the south, a hydroelectric dam on the Compiègne River, a power grid overhaul that could light up every rural school and clinic in the country. Military aid that promised to crush jihadist cells in less than 2 years. 5 elite battalions trained and armed. U.S. drones circling the skies. And at the heart of it all, full access to Burkina Faso's rich underground veins, gold, manganese, zinc, and the holy grail of 21st century minerals, lithium. This could be transformational, said the Minister of Economy, adjusting his glasses as he scrolled through the projections. They're offering a 10% royalty rate, plus 7 direct jobs per mining site. Traoré listened in silence, then turned to Tapsoba, the Minister of Mines, who stood and pointed to a massive map pinned to the wall. Red dots blinked where the lithium lay buried, mostly in the southwest, regions still haunted by conflict. 35 billion in projected revenue, Tapsoba said, over 18 years. But only if we manage the contracts right. If not, he paused, it's another resource curse. Salifu leaned forward, lowering his voice. There's one more element. They want a permanent U.S. military base, near Kaya. Joint operations, they say. But in truth, it means boots on our soil indefinitely. Control from the inside. A hush fell across the room. Traoré stood, walked to the window. Outside, in the distant slums, power lines flickered weakly. Intermittent blackouts had become part of life here. He stared into the darkness, hearing the voices of school teachers, mothers, farmers who had trusted him when he promised change. This wasn't just about roads or gold. It was about sovereignty, dignity. He didn't turn around when he asked, "What about our agreements with Moscow?" "With Beijing," Salifu replied quietly. "The Russians won't take this lightly. We've signed a military cooperation pact. The Chinese? Their eastern mining project overlaps with one of the lithium clusters. There will be friction." Fatigue gnawed at the edges of Traoré's thoughts. The clock read 3:47 a.m. He hadn't slept, but sleep wouldn't come tonight anyway, not with the weight of a continent pressing against his spine. "What do our brothers in Mali and Guinea say?" he asked, still facing the city lights. Salifu nodded. "I spoke to Colonel Simogo in Mali. They received a similar proposal last month. They turned it down. Too many strings." Traoré exhaled slowly, then turned. "Bring me Fatimata." Minutes later, the door creaked open and a young woman entered with thick braids, sharp eyes, and a folder thick enough to rewrite a nation's future. Fatimata had grown up in the diaspora, studied in London and Nairobi, and returned to Burkina Faso, because despite the risks, she still believed. She set the dossier on the table, her voice calm and clear. "Mr. President," she said, "I've reviewed 14 mining contracts between African nations and Western firms. In every case, actual benefits to local populations fell short, by an average of 65%. Disputes went to international arbitration courts that favor foreign corporations 9 out of 10 times. She tapped on a graph projected onto the screen. "This is how it plays out. They offer billions. We get roads and weapons, yes, but they control processing, exports, even staffing. In the end, the money leaves, the land is scarred, and the people still wait." Traoré looked down at the faded map of Burkina Faso on the wall, drawn by colonial hands, bordered by lines that were never ours. He clenched his jaw. His fingers found a photograph tucked inside his pocket. Worn edges, black and white. Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary whose ghost still haunted these halls. Traoré whispered to himself, barely audible, "Guide us, comrade." He turned back to the room. "We need a full risk matrix by dawn. Show me alternatives, regional alliances, public-private options. I want a model where we mine, process, and export on our terms." Fatimata nodded. "It won't be easy." Traoré's voice was low but firm. "Nothing worth building ever is." Outside, dawn was breaking over the city. Crimson light crept across rooftops and markets, warming the metal shutters of small shops and the faces of tired vendors preparing for another day. But inside the palace, time had stopped. A decision was forming, not just economic or political, but generational. Traoré wasn't simply weighing numbers, he was weighing the soul of a nation. Tomorrow, he would face Trump again. Cameras on, pressure rising. But tonight he was building his defense, not with weapons but with wisdom, history, and the unwavering hope that Burkina Faso could still choose its own path. And this time, the world would be watching. The sun was barely above the horizon when the palace staff began preparing the secure conference room again. Unlike the night before, this morning carried a strange stillness, as if even the air knew history was waiting to be written. Inside, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood before a mirror, adjusting his uniform with deliberate precision. His red beret, once just military attire, now symbolized something more. Resistance, integrity, a warning that Burkina Faso would not sell itself quietly. The ministers arrived in dark suits. Fatimata entered last, clutching a thin folder. Salifou took his place near the communications console, checking the encrypted line one last time. When the screen lit up, there was no fanfare, no music, just the static buzz before a digital connection. And then, there he was. Donald Trump seated confidently, flanked by a hawkish Secretary of State and two grinning corporate CEOs. He wasted no time. "Captain Traoré," he said, his voice upbeat, "I trust you've had time to consider our generous offer. My team's ready to deploy as early as next week. Let's build something great, together." Traoré remained composed. Outside in the city beyond the palace gates, life carried on. Vendors shouted. Kids played barefoot in the dust. But inside this room, time slowed. Every eye in the room turned toward Traoré, every heartbeat suspended in expectation. He leaned forward, voice calm but unyielding. "Mr. President, we have studied your proposal in detail. We understand its implications, and we are prepared to respond." Fatimata, standing quietly at the edge of the room, exchanged a glance with Salifou. Her lips barely moved. "This is it," she whispered. "He's about to show the world what sovereignty means." Trump folded his arms. "Well, let's hear it." A long silence, and then Traoré spoke. "Burkina Faso," he said, "must respectfully decline your offer." The room fell into absolute silence. Trump blinked, his smile faltered, replaced by confusion, then disbelief. I don't follow," he stammered. "Captain, this is a once-in-a-lifetime deal. Billions in investment, security. We're offering you everything your country needs." Traoré did not flinch. "Mr. President," he said, voice steady, "for too long, Africa's wealth has been extracted, but our people have remained poor. Promises have been made before, roads, schools, aid, and yet the people wait. What we need now is not charity wrapped in control. We need equity." Trump's tone sharpened. "So you'd rather hand your resources to the Russians and Chinese? They'll exploit you worse than we ever could." Traoré's gaze narrowed. "We will partner with those who honor our sovereignty, not those who believe they are entitled. To our land, we welcome cooperation, but it must be rooted in mutual respect and shared benefit. That means local processing of minerals, skills transfer, youth employment, and majority state ownership. That is non-negotiable." The American advisors shifted uncomfortably. One leaned toward the mic. "Those terms are not commercially viable. Captain, no U.S. company will agree." Before Traoré could reply, Fatimata stepped forward. Her voice was soft but clear. "Other nations have secured such terms," she said. "The issue isn't whether it's possible, it's that African countries have been told they're too weak to demand them." A beat of silence. Traoré nodded. "This is about dignity, about finally choosing our own destiny. We are done begging for scraps while the world feasts on our soil. This land belongs to our children, and I will not trade their future for any short-term promise, no matter how golden it sounds." Trump's face turned stormy. "You're making a huge mistake. Without us, your country stays unstable, poor, alone. This offer won't come again." Traoré leaned in, voice calm but cutting. It's a risk we are prepared to take. Burkina Faso chooses the harder path, the sovereign path. Then, quietly, with a faint smile, he added, as Thomas Sankara once said, "He who does not defend, his wealth will never enjoy it." And with that, the call ended. The screen went dark. For a full 10 seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The weight of what had just transpired, this soft-spoken rejection of a superpower, hung thick in the air. Then, from the far end of the room, the Minister of Communications stood up. "We must prepare the press release," he said. "The people need to hear this. Today." What no one in that room knew, not yet, was that a junior USA, deeply moved by Traor's stand, had secretly recorded the entire exchange, and within hours, the footage would leak. By sunset, the video was everywhere. 6 million views in 3 hours. Hashtags exploded across social media. Traor vs Trump. Africa stands tall. Not for sale. Commentators couldn't look away. Traor's serene defiance, his articulate refusal, the contrast with Trump's rising frustration. It was a global moment. In Ouagadougou's streets, thousands flooded Revolution Square, waving red, green, and gold flags. Youths sang patriotic songs, mothers cried quietly, and vendors passed out cold drinks like it was a national holiday. People said they hadn't felt this kind of pride since the days of Sankara. In a crowded cafe, a law student named Issouf turned to his friend and whispered, "He spoke like Sankara, but for our generation." In the palace, Traor watched the reactions unfold with a mix of awe and concern. He hadn't planned for this to go public, but maybe it needed to. Maybe this was how you light a spark. He turned to Salifou. "What are the international reactions?" Salifou checked his tablet. "Mixed. Western media is framing it as a snub, but in Africa and the global south, overwhelming support. South Africa just tweeted their endorsement. Mali and Guinea too." Traor nodded. His phone began to buzz again. Diplomats, leaders, journalists. Everyone wanted to speak with the man who had said no to the world's loudest yes. Later that night, as fireworks lit up the Ouagadougou skyline and supporters danced under the stars, Traor addressed the nation on live TV. "People of Burkina Faso," he began, his voice steady. "Today's decision was not against America or any nation. It was for us, for Africa, for a world where every country, big or small, rich or poor, stands as an equal." He paused, eyes bright with restrained emotion. "The road we've chosen is not easy, but it is ours, freely chosen, and together, we will walk it, with dignity." By midnight, the clip of Captain Traor's quiet defiance had circled the globe. From Nairobi to New York, from Johannesburg to Jakarta, people watched a small nation stare down a superpower, not with threats, not with weapons, but with principle. It wasn't just what Traor said. It was how he said it, calm, unflinching, as if centuries of exploitation had finally found a voice that would not tremble. The world noticed. Western analysts flooded TV screens, spinning the narrative. Burkina Faso is risking economic ruin, unrealistic demands from an unproven leader. But their words couldn't drown out the roars rising across Africa. In Dakar, youth marched with signs that read, "Our land, our rules." In Kampala, students painted murals of Traor alongside Sankara and Mandela. In Addis Ababa, during the African Union summit 5 weeks later, Traor entered to a full standing ovation. Delegates leaned forward, not just to shake his hand, but to learn from him. His speech echoed like thunder through the conference hall. "We are no longer asking to be heard," he declared. "We are speaking, and the world will adjust." Meanwhile, Western firms began pulling out of Burkina Faso, citing unstable investment climate. Their exit made headlines. But beneath those headlines, something unexpected began. Offers from Asia and the Middle East began arriving. New partners willing to meet Burkina Faso's terms. Local processing, youth training, and majority state ownership. The nation's new path, though steep, had no shortage of believers. And on the streets of Ouagadougou, hope had a new name. "He's fighting for us," a market woman told her neighbor, clutching her child. "For the first time, I believe our sons will inherit something more than sand." In a packed cafe, Issouf, the law student, lifted his glass. "This is bigger than politics," he said. Traoré showed the world that even the weak can say no. In Traoré's hometown of Bani, an old teacher sat beneath a sprawling baobab tree, his transistor radio tuned in. The villagers gathered around as the news played. He smiled, pride swelling in his chest. "That boy," he said softly. "This is our boy. And he has taught the world that even the smallest nation can claim its place with dignity." Miles away, deep in the artisanal gold mines, laborers paused their work. For the first time, they allowed themselves to dream that maybe, just maybe, their children wouldn't have to choose between emigration and poverty, that the land beneath their feet might finally belong to them. Back in the presidential palace, Traoré returned from a long day of calls with foreign ministers. He stood alone at his office window, the city glowing under 1,000 stars. He pulled from his pocket a worn photo of Sankara, creased, faded, but alive in spirit. "We're trying, comrade," he whispered. This wasn't just about lithium, or Trump, or geopolitics. It was about a generation stepping forward, refusing to repeat history, and daring to rewrite it instead. And as the screen fades to black, a voice asks, "Who is your Sankara, your Traoré, your Issouf, the one who believed in you when no one else did?" Because sometimes all it takes is one voice standing firm to remind a people, you are not for sale. If this story moved you, if you believe dignity is more powerful than dollars, like, share, and subscribe. Comment below. What would you have done in Traoré's shoes? And stay tuned. In the next episode, Western powers regroup. A secret negotiation begins behind closed doors, and Traoré is faced with a new challenge, not from abroad, but from within. The fire has spread, but so have the shadows coming soon.